Right. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm also traveling a little bit, so I'm in between places and trying the setting out. So I'm outside. We'll see if there's any interruptions. Apologies. All right, let me share my screen and the agenda. There's a couple of things I wanted to cover to kick things off today. So the last time we met, we talked through our API user survey, some of the findings, and I hope you all got a chance to watch that, and I'm happy to jump in and have some more discussion today. One thing I did want to highlight that's new is this gap analysis. So this is something I shared just a link to in the last conversation. What I'm hoping to do is get with the teams here especially and identify what features our teams support and try to map those to APIs in REST and GraphQL. So by the end of this, I'm hoping that we get a little bit of a picture of what features are not backed by APIs yet, or where we have maybe gaps in terms of parity between the two APIs. I don't think by any means this is perfect, but what I'm hoping is that everyone here can participate and we can iterate on it and maybe improve on the process. So once you jump into that sheet, I need to add a link there, but and I think I have one earlier in the presentation. But once you jump into it, you should be able to just go to the instructions tab and give that a try. And if you hit snags, you can comment me. If you have ideas, you can comment me as well. But yeah, I'll pause on that item. Anyone have thoughts or feedback? Does this seem helpful? Or should I share a little bit more about it?
Are we going to create issues for each group to go through the API endpoints that they maintain and they're responsible for and go through that? Or because I'm assuming that we could do this work and maybe spread the workload among the members of this working group, but it might be probably more efficient or like more accurate if we get the DRIs of each API endpoints to go through them.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, my thought was maybe first starting with this group. That way, we're kind of doing a little bit more of the legwork to see if there's a way to improve this, and I can put this into an issue in our board if that would be helpful. And we could start with what are our DRIs here and the teams that we're working with, so we could branch out that way. But I was thinking about if you guys have seen this pajamas OKR issue that we have to track across the company. Think about leveraging an approach like that once we have it kind of nailed down to start to spread it across GitLab as a whole and get something comprehensive. And then what would be great, I think I'm going to defer to the engineering folks for ideas, but I think it would be awesome to not have to do this again. This is pretty manual to start with, but once we have a good picture of it, maybe we can get this into code, something more programmatic that we can always see, from feature to APIs, what we have. So I'm open to suggestions for that as we get through this. But this will at least give us a start. We can start to see, where are all of our gaps? What do we anticipate in terms of effort to close them? And that gives us a scope to work with. So we can start talking about it from a business and product standpoint. Here's the capacity we have. Here's where we need to get to. And this is of course just one component of it. There's a lot of other work to do. Does that help?
Yeah, it does help. So we want to get like initially a map of where the gaps are and how much we have.
Right, and starting with us, and we can, what might help is you and I can collaborate in an issue to see how we want to kind of lay this out for our group here. And then I will want to expand this out further once we've validated that this is it's a valid approach to get this picture. Awesome. All right, so let's jump into the next item. So we did go through the user survey findings last time, and want to see if there's I'm just going to jump into any discussion and questions, but I can go into slides and try to discuss those further however we need. Okay, your first question, Fabio, how did we define API support? So this would be referring to this kind of category analysis, and that's a good question. We largely in this case just had it broken down with category titles. There wasn't like an in-depth description of each of these, so it's kind of up to the user's impressions ultimately. But that does give us something to dig into deeper. This isn't meant to be a standalone analysis like we're just using the survey and that's it. But I'm moving forward now with setting up conversations with our customers, so that's something to definitely dig into more.
Yeah, that's good.
Next question. Regarding REST GraphQL preference, I think there shouldn't, or I'll let you voice over it, Fabio.
Yeah, so this was related to some discussions on, what should we have like one type over like a preferred over another one, and in my opinion, seeing the results of the survey, which by the way they're really awesome, and thanks for running that. So definitely GraphQL is on the rise, but REST is not declining, and REST is the de facto probably standard for automations and workflows at the moment. So I don't see like us having a preference over like which one we should like use more often or something. Like we could have a preference internally for the front end, for example, to lean towards GraphQL. But I think ultimately we need to implement both and maintain both, in my opinion. And then boils down to what can we do to reduce this maintenance between the two things. And in my opinion is, there's this concept of hexagonal architecture, which would be like the underlying logic should be exactly the same, regardless whether you call it from a GraphQL mutation or will be a REST API call or will be a Rails controller or some sidekick worker that triggers some application logic. It should call the exact same code, which would be like, I don't know, a service object or something like that. And I think if we use this pattern more strictly, we would be able to have feature parity among the REST and GraphQL, and also being able to track if this layer, this it's called service object is called from GraphQL, but it's not called from REST API. We will be able to maybe identify, okay, we might have a gap there because we are using one thing with one type of API, we're not using with the other one. So in my opinion, that will be better over, I don't know, over like wrapping APIs and things like that, which might be a little bit more fragile in my opinion, and that ultimately would benefit also the entire design of the system, in my opinion, by using hexagonal architecture.
Yeah, I'll pause because I think the engineers on the call will have better responses than that, but I think this is an awesome idea on the surface.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I agree that we should not have a preference. We should support both APIs, and it seems that both APIs are important and are going to be important for our users. And I don't think that suddenly REST interface for our API is going to decline and won't be used as much because there are some different principles associated with both APIs, and some users like me prefer REST API because in some cases it's easier to use and it's simpler. And I think that basically it would be great to have a common abstraction for both to make it easier to add both implementations. But it might be challenging. It might be challenging because GraphQL organizes data differently. It's more like graph-like structure, whereas it matters how we store data in our database. So I think that REST API is usually going to be much more efficient when in terms of fetching data from our database. So if we use abstraction, it might be actually a bit slower. There might be an overhead to that abstraction. If we will need to align how we retrieve data from database, and for GraphQL it will work probably fine. But for REST it might be slower, because for the both APIs we will need to find the least common denominator, right? And in case of GraphQL, we will need to have a bit more elaborate method of retrieving data from our database, while for REST it's just select from, and it's as simple as that. I think we just need more technical research on that topic. It's not that simple. Like I think introducing a common abstraction might be a good idea, but we would need to understand details, because world of software consists of infinite amount of details, and details matter actually. So that's why it's tough. But yeah, but I completely agree that both APIs are important, and I think will be important.
I think we should be able, or at least it should be simpler to find a common abstraction, for example, for mutations, than for queries. I agree. I think for queries it will be more difficult. But for mutation, we seem to have a lot more equivalent logic that we could extract under the same abstraction. So maybe we could start distinguish between, like, even in terms of endpoints, we could start distinguishing between mutations, even on the REST side. What is this, like a mutation? Is this like purely like a query? And maybe understanding there, do we have more gaps in mutations, or we have more gaps in queries? So this might be also another kind of variable we can look at.
Yeah, and another aspect here is the library we are using. I think that we are using a community maintained gem. I might be mistaken. It's been a while since I actually. It's possible that we are maintaining it right now, but basically, it's also something that will come in a way of designing the common abstraction.
Awesome. I think this is probably a good one to get into an issue. I think we may have something out there already as a POC issue to try, testing out doing a wrapper, like a REST wrapper on GraphQL endpoint. Yeah, maybe we can identify where possible approaches are and do some POCs for each of the approaches and come to some conclusions. Would that be a good approach?
Yeah, that sounds good.
One thing that I would like to do, and I appreciate everyone that was able to make it to this call, is start to spread out the love a bit. So is there anyone who could take ownership of starting this issue and help us break it down?
Yeah, if you said we have already an issue about this.
So I'm not going to be as quick on the fly on the call, but I can follow up. I think we have one issue around exploring, like testing a wrapper. So I'm kind of imagining this would be more of an epic that is a POC underneath, if that makes sense, if an issue underneath the epic.
I think it's testing a wrapper around GraphQL in REST API. That's something we can definitely do. But one advice from me is that we should also POC the performance, because interfacing with database through the whole GraphQL Ruby code might actually be much slower than just talking directly to the database through active record models. So understanding what would be the performance penalty in that case, I think it might be very important.
Agreed. And I think that this epic issue, or epic, should maybe define the criteria by which we're evaluating these approaches. And this performance would, of course, be one. So if one approach is better in terms of performance and usability and all of the above, then we'll want to, I think, go that route. So Fabio, you're open to starting a new issue, a new epic, and I'll point you to the existing related issues.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. I'll do that.
Sorry if my typing is super loud. Okay. Yeah, any other discussion? I think one point I did want to double back on. So we're talking about the technical side of how we might approach this, but I do feel that in the discussion last 2 weeks ago, and what I'm hearing on this call, and with the feedback that we're seeing is that we agree that just going full on GraphQL is going to isolate or alienate some of our customers who depend on REST. So I think we have consensus with our group and the feedback that we're seeing that we need to support both, and it's just now a question of how. So when we're talking about the objectives of this group, the API vision is now about how do we support both REST and GraphQL. Right? 1 second. So, do we have any feedback on that? A thumbs up, at least. All right. Okay, moving on to the next item, API v5. Gers, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I'm sorry I moved that over the last item. I thought it might be important to discuss that before we run out of time. And yeah, I wanted to thank you, Grant, for the meeting you hosted with a customer recently, one of our biggest customers that are using GitLab.com. And the recording was awesome. I would say that what they were telling us was enlightening, and for me it was something that suddenly made me realize that our API in the current shape is not really a good fit for the biggest customers that have very high demands of how the API can be used at scale. And I wanted to start this discussion about our API version 5. And that would be basically something similar that we have right now. And it doesn't really matter right now whether it would be whether there will be parity between GraphQL or not. It might be an important aspect as well. But what is even more important, in my opinion, is the consistency, and that the API is designed to support the biggest customers that are using that at scale. And of course, rebuilding our REST API a little bit to ensure consistency, like every endpoint using similar pagination primitives, and responses designed to make it possible to actually make some workflows much more efficient. That would basically require bumping the major version of our API and API version 5. So yeah, I will try to find the recording link and paste it later the agenda, because I think it was awesome. So again, thank you, Grant, for facilitating this discussion. And yeah, what do you think about API version 5 designed around being efficient at scale and consistent? That's prerequisite for efficiency.
So for version 5, what do we mean for to be designed for efficiency? So we mean like they actually have different endpoints, they have different feature sets that we cannot, let's say backport to the existing version 4 in terms of performance improvements.
Yeah, I mean, it would be probably the same API like at version 4, but the deficiencies that make it very difficult to consume at scale would be removed, and consistency would be introduced across the endpoints, standardization of pagination, and there are other things like that. Because we do have customers telling us that this API we have cannot really be efficiently used at scale, and when you hear the problems they are struggling with, it's immediately clear that they are completely right, and our API is completely not designed to be efficiently used at a really high scale. So how it could look like, we could actually first of all introduce pagination abstraction that would be consistent across all endpoints. Right now, some endpoints are using the legacy pagination, some endpoints are using the new pagination. And there are other challenges that are making it difficult to use this API. There are some fields that are missing that make you query every project separately instead of you could actually retrieve some data from a group when you have like 10,000 projects. There are many things like that. So building a backlog of things we could improve and introducing new API version 5 to actually accommodate all the needs of the biggest customers, that I think that might be an interesting way forward. But I wanted to hear your opinion. What do you think about that?
I'll say first, that's, spot on from what I'm, I know you were going through the recording with one customer, but I've heard some of these complaints and issues across a couple of conversations I've had. And my intent is to get all these recordings shared in a central place for everyone to discover here. So apologies, I haven't gotten to that yet. But from there, I am hoping to break it down into, some of the common feedback we're hearing in very specific cases. And I think I'm not going to recall the specific case, but I know one was around like how to query projects, and that you get a list of projects, but you can't quite get all the details, so then you have to query the specific project. So just like these like patterns that I think a lot of customers are trying to do commonly, they're running into performance issues where it might take, I think it was 7 hours or something to span across all their groups, all their projects, just to get one bit of info. And then I think with GraphQL, there could be some cases there, but even our customers have even tried using GraphQL and have run into similar problems. So I think one thing that's interesting to keep in mind too is I'm hearing feedback that that customers don't feel that our data model is best suited for GraphQL, that this isn't this isn't quite the same use case as someone like Facebook and others that really depend on kind of traversing across an edge of a node. So these are things that seems like we're trying to fit into GraphQL, and we just need to explore further how to make this a bit more performant. So I definitely agree. And thanks for mentioning that, Gerzigors. I'll definitely try to get these conversations that I've had shared, and I'm going to be having a lot more coming up soon, and we'll keep everyone posted.
Yeah, and it would be great to have some kind of an epic or issue or a Google Doc to collaborate on, because there are some ideas like introducing bulk APIs that we don't really have right now, or extending our group API so that there are bulk operations or projects and stuff like that. So these are things that are only important when you are using API in a very high scale. And so far we kind of were unable to, introduce endpoints like that would make life of the biggest customers much easier.
Right.
And there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of things we could do. So enumerating that somewhere, brainstorming stuff like that, I think it would make it so much easier for us to, prepare our API version 5 that way. And I'm saying version 5 because because our current API is kind of inconsistent. We need to break compatibility to introduce this consistency. So it would be the next major version of our API.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, what I'll do is create an issue for the common customer feedback that I'm hearing, and links to where I'm storing recordings. If you see that we don't have an issue more on like API v5 specific tasks, that might be.
I think that I recall seeing issue for API v5. I will try to find it.
Yeah, there may be one actually. All right, so I think we're pretty well at time. I'm going to leave this one as read only. I think it would be helpful for everyone on the call or not to jump back and kind of see what issues are you participating in. If you're not, maybe see where you can, and then share some updates, because I think we have some good ones that are in progress and would be good to see where things are. The one thing I did want to leave you with is something that I've been brainstorming as well, going through this feedback. Not looking at this as official by any means. This is definitely in progress, but I'm imagining that there's essentially a hierarchy of needs when it comes to the developer experience. And we need to achieve the bottom levels of this hierarchy of needs before we can really truly solve those that are above it. This is kind of my view, my perspective right now, and it's in flux as I learn more. But for example, it'd be pretty difficult to solve customers' problems by focusing on automated documentation when we have gaps in our APIs. They're still going to have problems. They're not going to be able to use the endpoints or solve the use cases that they have. While the documentation may be great, there's a challenge when we have gaps in the APIs. So this is kind of the way I'm seeing it. If we're talking about priorities, how we order our work, I would like to explore this further. I could see this evolving and going into our long-term API vision as we define that. But anyway, this was great discussion today. If you didn't get a chance to share an opinion, share it in the notes. And yeah, look forward to discussing next time. I'm hoping to have more of a prioritized list, maybe by the next call, that we can start to really break things down for and want to see more involvement. But great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.